Does that make sense?
Yeah, 100%. That explains a lot more about what your assessment looks like, and gives people a better perspective as to the diagnosis and how you arrive at that. Because there's a lot going on, and I think the brain is much misunderstood, and we haven't explored what the brain is and can do, and the whole fullness of our capabilities. So I think what you're doing is quite interesting and could be good even for people who don't have a perceived issue with their thinking or their ability to use their brain and focus and all of these things. I think it can be very important for that as well.
Well, and that's actually how I got involved in neurofeedback, because many years ago I was the goalie coach for the Ottawa Senators, and I was looking for tools and strategies, anything that would improve my NHL goalie's ability to focus.
Yeah.
And at that time, there was a professor at the University of Ottawa that introduced me to neurofeedback, because they were using it with a lot of the Olympic athletes, and they loved it. The analogy was it was weight training for the brain.
Awesome.
And the one thing that they really talked about and loved about was they could actually see it on the screen. It was taking the invisible and making it visible. So when they were making this animation move with their mind, this is like, wow, this is so powerful. So I got introduced to the ADD Center in Toronto, and through Dr. Michael and Linda Thompson, I learned how to use neurofeedback as a way of improving, one's ability to regulate not only their attention, but their emotion. Because for me, ADD, it can come, and this is very general, but for some people, they have more difficulty regulating their attention. For other clients, it's more regulating their mood. And so one of the things, that's where, mindfulness, audiovisual entrainment, neurofeedback, because one of the things we're looking at is where in the brain things are dysregulated. If people have too much of a certain brainwave in the temporal lobes, temporal, they're going to have difficulty regulating their mood. And so that's one of the things, the great thing is we can use this not just in a clinical application, but we can also use this for peak performance as well.
Awesome. Well, we have some more questions for you on the ADHD and ADD things. So let's dig into a little bit more about the QEEG. How important is that to to identifying and then treating ADHD? Like, do you do it at the beginning and then do you do it later to kind of see how things are progressing? Like, is it more than one time thing, or how does that work?
Yeah, great question. So when people come into our office to do the assessment, it's a 3-hour process.
Wow.
So the first thing that we do is the brain scan. And so what we're looking at, as I mentioned, each lobe of the brain has a very specific cognitive, behavioral, and emotional component to it. So the brain scan, for me, I put more weighting on the brain scan than I do the computerized tests.
Sure.
And the other, because again, some people can develop some very good coping strategies.
Right. They can
despite
fake it.
Because I've had some times where people have done well on the IVA and TOVA. That's why, again, I mentioned I don't put stock into just one thing. It's looking at it from an overall perspective. But the QEEG, really simple. Like if you went to your doctor, Trevor, and they do the blood pressure test, 120/80, normal, quote unquote, and then they look, are you 1, 2, 3 standard deviations below or above the norm? Same with the brain scan. If someone has too much or too little of a brain wave, that's going to cause them to feel a certain way. And we're also looking at, generally speaking, the prefrontal lobes get dysregulated with someone who has ADD, or the temporal lobes will get dysregulated. And the great thing with the QEEG, it also shows not just the magnitude, but what we call the asymmetry in the brain. So, for example, if someone's also suffering depression, which often can be a case, or anxiety, because if I can't focus, well, what's wrong with me? And so that's where the anxiety or the depression can come in. And we have the QEEG also shows us that through the asymmetry. not to get too technical here, but if there's too much alpha on the left side of the brain, that's where people can tend to generally speak, feel depressed or their mood is dysregulated. If they have too much beta brainwave on the right side of the brain, that's where they can have anxiety or overthinking or busy brain. And those need to be also factored in, because again, if I'm depressed or I'm anxious, that's also going to affect my ability to regulate my attention and regulate my mood. And that's the one nice thing that the QEEG does, is it allows us to see very specifically what's going on in the brain, and then more importantly, what particular, it'll tells us protocols, treatment protocols, that if we address these, that can, for example, if someone has too much theta, the whole point of the neurofeedback is to lower that theta. And when they start to not daydream as much, guess what happens to their ability to focus in the boardroom or classroom? It improves significantly.
Excellent. So training for the brain, building your mental muscle.
And that's literally like the way it's weight training for the brain.
Awesome. I love it. I think that's a great way to look at it, and it can be used for a lot of different things. Now, a couple of things we haven't really touched on is the cognitive perceptual training and neurofeedback training. So tell me a little bit about the cognitive perceptual and how that helps with ADHD.
Sure. So in the hockey world, you'll often hear, I don't like the term vision training.
Sure.
The reason why we use the term cognitive and perceptual is 80% of our sensory information comes through our eyes. So when we talk about cognitive, what we're looking at is your cognitive capacities, your short-term memory, your working memory, your brain processing speed, your executive functioning, sustained attention, selective attention. So we've partnered up with some companies that they've had over 25 years of research to support. So everything that we have in our office, this is one thing I really want to emphasize, and I would say to all of our audiences, make sure everything that I've gone through it myself personally. I've been the guinea pig for a lot of our programs, but it's not John Stevenson. It's evidence-based, it's research-based. So cognitive, what we're doing is we're doing an objective measurement of brain processing speed. We're doing an objective measurement of working memory. We're also doing selective attention, sustained attention. So we're measuring a person's cognitive capacities. We're also measuring on the other side their visual, depth perception, convergence, divergence, recognition, like spatial awareness, peripheral vision. And we want to make sure that there's the sensory issues are also addressed. So one of the great things about cognitive perceptual is we can do an assessment. You came in, you did the neuro tracker, and it wasn't easy, was it?
No, it's not easy.
But it provides us a very, again, objective measurement of where a person's at. And then more importantly, we can use this technology to train the brain so that people can learn how to, park distractions. They can focus better. And we've used it for all sorts of different age groups, from 6 years old all the way up to 80 years old. So the cognitive perceptual is another assessment tool that we use with our ADHD population, our clients.
Okay, so the next part, the neurofeedback, how is that different from the cognitive perceptual, and how does that also help?
Well, this is going to sound strange, but if you came into our office and I was hooked up to the neurofeedback, okay, we have all sorts of different feedbacks. We can use games. We can use a Netflix show. So I'll give you an example. So if I have a lot more slower brainwave processing, if I have a lot of delta, theta, alpha, and I don't have enough of that good beta, what we do is we set the thresholds on the. So the other day I was watching Murdoch Mysteries on Netflix. Okay, so I've got the sensors placed on my scalp. Now there's nothing going in; it's just measuring brainwaves. So when I'm focused and I'm alert and I'm calm, the picture will stay nice and bright and the volume will stay up. The moment I start to get sleepy or daydreamy or zoning out, guess what happens to the picture? It goes black and the volume goes down. So what the brain and the client is getting in that moment is real live time feedback as to what's happening in their brain.
Gotcha.
Now, guess what the brain wants to do? It wants to watch this program. So the brain is learning. That's what neurofeedback is. It's learning how to get into that state.
Okay.
And in that process, we're rewiring. We're changing the neural circuitry. So skills rather than pills.
Yeah.
And so the brain is learning how to get into that state. And barring any emotional trauma or any concussion, we're based on the neuroplasticity of the brain, that the brain has the capacity to rewire, heal itself, grow new neural tissue. That person can learn how to focus better. If it's a game, it could be a roller coaster. And when I'm focused and I'm calm and alert, I'm actually making this roller coaster move. The moment if I start to wander or start to have what I call busy brain, guess what happens to the roller coaster?
It stops.
It stops.
Yeah.
So that's where neurofeedback, that's how we use neurofeedback in that application. The Cognizance Neuro Tracker. Well, you saw it. In this particular situation, and I know it's going to sound a little strange to our audience, but there's these 8 yellow balls.
Right.
And it's in 3D. And that's really important to emphasize because the brain learns in 3D.
Right.
So a core program on the Neuro Tracker, we would start off, it could be 2 balls, 3 balls, or 4 balls. I had to doing 4 balls. So what'll happen is there's these 8 yellow balls, and then 4 of them will light up.
Yeah.
And what'll happen is you have to remember those. They'll go back to yellow, and for 8 seconds, they'll move all around. And at the end of that 8 seconds, you have to identify where those 4 balls are. And what happens is that's selective attention. You have to focus for that time. That's sustained attention. As they're moving around, that's working memory. And so, and what happens is if the client identifies it correctly, the speed gets faster. And so now we're working on brain processing speed. And this is trainable. And so we've had, business traders come in. And we've also had 8-year-old ADHD clients. And it looks like a game, but it's not a game. It's literally a medical device. But a lot of the kids, they find it fun. It's challenging. And so that's one of the core programs with, with Neuro Tracker. So it's working the brain, but working it in different ways.
Awesome. Well, this has been a great conversation, learning more about, what to do if you suspect a loved one has ADD and ADHD and what you guys do at Zone Psychology. So what is the best way for someone to schedule an assessment with you?
So our website is zonepsych.com. And what they can do, our phone number is 780-803-5646. If they go to the Zone Psych website, there's a contact us button, and it's just a matter of sending us, hitting that button and saying, I suspect that myself or my family has ADD, and we want to see if that's the case, and they can just easily reach out to us either by phone or by email.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, John. This has been very informative, and I hope that you guys found it very informative as well. And if you have anyone that you know that could use some psychological help, whether for anxiety or anything else, feel free to reach out to Zone Psychology. We're going to bring more of these videos to you, and we'll see you on the next one.